Hey, what's up guys, Rep here. So I'm sure a lot of you are already aware of the immense level of drama and controversy surrounding Helldivers 2 recently, and I covered some of this in yesterday's video where I went over the backlash that Helldivers 2 and Sony have been facing due to some recent changes they were trying to implement. Now, when I made this title, Helldivers 2 is finished, I was not exaggerating. At the time, things were looking really grim for this franchise. However, I am happy to announce that that narrative has switched in less than 24 hours, and I believe that Helldivers 2 is now saved because Sony admitted defeat and handed gamers a much-deserved W. Now, before we get into the recent updates, let's take 1 minute to remind ourselves how we got here. So on May 3rd, Helldivers 2 announced that PC players will have to link their Steam account to a PlayStation Network account to continue accessing Helldivers 2. Now, this was immediately met with negative responses getting review bombed to the point where Helldivers 2 on Steam had an overwhelmingly negative recent set of reviews, and the overall all-time set of reviews was now mixed. Going forward, a lot of players cited their concerns about setting up a PlayStation Network account because Sony has had many data breaches. Also, in order to create a PSN account, you had to live in about, less than 24 countries in the world because the vast majority of countries don't even have access or the ability to create a PSN account in the first place. And on top of that, among the few that can, a lot of countries in Europe, like Germany and the United Kingdom, for example, players would have to submit facial scans or government IDs to create a PSN account. And on top of that, when players initially bought Helldivers 2 months ago, the rule at Sony did not require players to create a PSN account to link with their Steam account. However, after the May 3rd changes, that rule would also change, saying that you may be required to link your Steam account to a PSN account to play a PC release. Now, despite the absolutely terrible optics of that situation, Sony-sucking corporate dick riders would continue to defend Sony and criticize PC gamers for calling out this ridiculous change. However, these defenders are taking a massive L, just like Sony is taking a massive L right now. So, last night, PlayStation's official account announced this. Helldiver fans, we've heard your feedback on the Helldivers 2 account linking update. The May 6th update, which would have required Steam and PlayStation Network account linkings for new players and for current players beginning May 30th, will not be moving forward. We're still learning what is best for PC players, and your feedback has been invaluable. Thanks again for your continued support of Helldivers 2, and we'll keep you updated on future plans. Obviously, a huge and deserved W for gamers, and you can see the reception of this has been very, very positive. Only hours into the morning, you can already see the reviews. The recent ones have climbed from almost single digits to 45% mixed, and the overall all-time set of ratings has climbed up to 61% despite being below 50% only yesterday. This was very well received by gamers who feel like their voice was finally heard. Now, before you say, oh, W PlayStation, this isn't a W for PlayStation, this is a W for gamers. PlayStation is simply correcting their own mistakes, and it's like the first step of many they have to do. If there is a mile that PlayStation and Sony has to do to make their reputation better with gamers, this was the first couple of steps. Okay, they have a long way to go to earn the trust back of gamers, and also seeing a large volume of feedback being used to influence Sony into making changes. Wow, that should be encouraging to gamers. What about other games that have been censored, like Stellar Blade? There's petitions out there with tens of thousands of signatures to restore the changes. That might be used as a bargaining chip to make Sony go back on other bad decisions that they made to games like Stellar Blade. Now, of course, just like with the announcement of this account linking change, people are still trying to defend Sony. You see posts like this saying, facts people keep ignoring. Sony created and owns the Helldivers IP. Sony is the only owner in the history of Helldivers. Sony has funded Arrowhead for over 10 years, 8 years with no game released. Therefore, without Sony, you're not playing Helldivers. What is the point that this person's trying to make? you could use the same logic to say Sony doesn't exist without customers. And thank God for once, they actually listened. This is very strange astroturfing of these arguments and another desperate attempt to defend Sony. Now, in the replies, this user raises a good point. So they say this: now can everyone quit taking this out on the Helldivers 2 devs? They ended up in the crossfire for this, and it wasn't fair to them as they were doing what they were contractually obligated to do. And this is a very fair point. The only thing that the Helldivers 2 devs are responsible for is making a really good game. And it was unfortunate that they got caught in the crossfire, and also ultimately the game they produced is getting negative reviews because of something that Sony is doing. However, beyond just the devs, there's other parties that are responsible at Arrowhead. And we'll talk about the CEO in a minute because I believe that he is somewhat culpable for some of these negative things that have happened. But the main focus should be on the community managers and the mods for Helldivers and Arrowhead who stoked the flames and made this situation so much worse by lashing out at people who had an issue with this account linking change. So we talked a lot about Spitz in this last video I made yesterday. He is a community manager who initially mocked a lot of people who were upset about this account leaking change when it was announced. However, credit where credit is due. While a lot of other community managers privated their account and literally ran away when this crisis was happening, Spitz would admit that they went too far with their previous comments, that they underestimated just how far all this goes, and then even encouraged gamers to go leave negative reviews on Helldivers 2 to make their voices heard, and even encourage people to request refunds. This was a very bold change. Whether it was authentic or not, at least it took some balls to make this statement and to change their narrative so quickly once they saw the backlash from gamers. However, we're now going to move on from the actions of these community managers to the actions of some Helldivers 2 mods. And we're going to start with Grums here, aka Mark Kern, the same person who's been receiving death threats and bounties on their head for calling out censorship of games like Stellar Blade. He would share this tweet saying this: Helldivers moderator Purple Squid Gion falsely proclaims that I have sexually assaulted many people. Falsely claims I send people to attack their CMs and their families, currently banning anyone who defends me or even likes a comment that defends me from this slander, and of course adds the related parties and says, are you okay with this? And then says, also, I am not far right, I'm actually left of center, but these radicals have pushed all sanity into a bucket and kicked it off a cliff. Now let's see what happened here. So here is the he/they mod for Helldivers 2 Purple Squid Gion, and here's their comments responding to someone bringing up Mark Kern's name, where they said this: someone who sexually assaulted many people he worked with, lost his position as CEO, now is a far-right influencer who had people attack more than one of our CMs and their families. And they would double down by saying this: anyone who is a Grums fan, please out yourself so I can help you out the door. This is absolutely insane, by the way. You're a mod for a video game. You are already out of line when you're talking about subjects that have nothing to do with your moderation role. And you're especially out of line when you start using that role to slander someone and accuse them of committing multiple SAs without a single bit of proof, besides also predictably labeling all of your enemies as the far right, which is absolutely ridiculous. This is absolutely wild behavior. And you can see people even in the replies on Twitter trying to double down on this. This user saying it's not slander if it's true, where another user says, correct, it's not slander, it's libel. And then the user says, but it's true, where they're asked for proof and they provide none. These people are insane. And here is Purple Squid Gion doubling down when people say, please do not slander strangers in public. Not only is it unprofessional, it is wrong, where the mod says this: slander implies it was a lie. They are literally doubling down on these baseless allegations, okay? We live in a time where you can't simply say, I dislike that person. No, you got to go to the next level and accuse them of multiple crimes. You can't just admit, I don't like this person, I'm going to ignore them, and I'm going to move on. But you got to go to such extremes to validate your own agenda. And you know what? I understand the both financial cost and the time cost of filing a lawsuit. But man, I can't wait for one of these people to reap what they sow in these situations, because they are doing everything in their power to make it very clear that they are publicly defaming someone, and they're very confident about it. And they're showing with this right here that they have the intent to make these claims out there. It's crazy. But going forward, Grums would also report that the mention of his name is now banned in the Helldivers Discord, and they are trying to blame him as a part of this PR mess that they created for themselves. It began with the attempt for Sony to make this whole account linking situation, but it was exacerbated by these community managers and mods who are saying all of this completely crazy stuff. Now, returning to this reply to the PlayStation tweet, remember we talked about not taking this out on the Helldivers 2 devs, but also the CEO had a small role in the mess of this situation. And we're going to go through some of their replies on social media, and it will show that they definitely were aware and having to deal with Sony's ridiculous request, and maybe they didn't handle it the best they could, but I will also commend them for their honesty in this situation. So here is the CEO of Arrowhead and the creative director of Helldivers 2. When asked by this user saying, PlayStation Network isn't supported by my country, what do I do? They simply replied, I don't know. That's how bad things were less than 24 hours ago. You have the CEO of Arrowhead literally saying, I don't know what to do. That is really bad. Honest, but shows a very grim picture at the time. Also, when asked about this screenshot that one of the community directors was saying, basically that this was always a part of the plan, well, they say that they preferred if this was optional, but there was more to this, and they would admit that they had some blame in this situation. So, the CEO says, I do have a part to play. I am not blameless in all of this. It was my decision to disable account linking at launch so that players could play the game. I did not ensure players were aware of the requirement, and we didn't talk about it enough. We knew about it 6 months before launch that it would be mandatory for online PlayStation titles. So here you have the CEO of Arrowhead admitting that they knew this account linking requirement was going to happen eventually, and they've known about it for months, but they didn't say anything or didn't make a big enough effort to make players aware of this. That is not good. I think that is shady behavior, and they did it to sell more titles. Obviously. Okay? Were they correct when they said that they would sell less games if players knew about this upcoming account linking feature? Of course. Less people would buy the game. And they decided to basically bury their head in the sand and act like this was going to go away. I think, personally, that the CEO just hoped that eventually Sony would see the success of Helldivers 2, and when this date finally approached in May, where this account link would happen, they would give Helldivers 2 a pass. And they would say, you know what, forget it. The game's going so well, we're not going to move forward. But finally, that date did arrive, and Sony doubled down and said, nope, we're going forward with it, just like you knew about 6 months ago. Now, I will say I appreciate the honesty and the professionalism of some of these replies from the CEO. I will say that, because honestly, 99% of people in his position wouldn't have said anything. They didn't have to. And honestly, they would have gotten away with it if these changes still were announced last night by Sony and these things went back, these account linking changes. Nobody would have known about the fact that the CEO knew about this months ago. But they were honest on Twitter, and maybe it's against their best interest, but I think it showed at least a level of responsibility and accountability here. And they would also have a similar response when asked by Savvy here about this whole linking situation and knowing about it 6 months ago. And they gave, again, a very reasonable and honest response to this question that is asking about some things that make them look bad. And of course, seeing this very professional and just reasonable series of interactions, a question and a polite answer, the Kotaku editor Alyssa would be fuming. She made this subtweet this morning saying, "Don't love to see the Arrowhead CEO replying to the same woman who thinks the United Nations is making your games woke and is making Pepe Silvia boards about it. If more people were full-throated talking about these chuds, maybe that would not happen." I don't know what she's trying to say with this last part. It sounds very weird. But yeah, the UN is definitely attacking video games. We know this. And also, Alyssa is mad because Sylvia was the one responsible for making the board linking all the connections, both government and alike, that companies like Sweet Baby Inc. are involved with. She did the research. Imagine being a journalist who's mad that someone is doing your job better than you and actually doing research to discover just how much government backing companies like Sweet Baby Inc. have. This is embarrassing and another example of people living rent-free in her head. And Savvy would reply, sharing a screenshot of Alyssa's tweet saying, "For the record, she has an issue with a CEO saying thank you to me for the civil questions. If you'd recall, her own questions towards a different CEO were met with the CEO saying she misrepresented him this weekend." That is something I talked about in a recent video as well if you want to check that out. And she would go on saying, "I'm not sure what full-throated means, and I honestly don't want to know what, I don't know what chuds are, but if you're a writer with such a limited vocabulary where all you can do is hurl insults, I'm really not concerned about your opinion. Are you calling for harassment for me, all because I ask questions? Why would full-throated talking about these chuds stop someone from speaking to me? Doesn't sound very inclusive." Also, here's the thing too, like if you're confused what chuds means at this point, it just means anyone these people don't like. You're a chud, just like you're also a Nazi and probably a Zionist at this point. All of these things, right? They're just watered down buzzwords at this point. But also this whole thing about getting mad about asking a question. Imagine being a journalist, being mad about people asking questions. That is your entire existence as a journalist, is to ask questions. And here you have someone asking a question and getting a fair and productive response, and you're jealous and angry. It's so sad. But moving forward, returning to Mark Kern here, we should learn something from this situation with Sony and Helldivers 2. They said, "We have looked at your large volume of feedback, and we are taking that to heart, and we are going to make changes." How does that apply to Stellar Blade? Well, here we have a petition, which I believe has over 80,000 signatures at this point, with the hopes of reverting censorship of this game. That is a great bargaining chip, and we should push once again to not forget about Stellar Blade and try to get these changes once again reverted, as people were promised with the uncensored release of this game. And also, as Vera points out here, don't give Sony the pass. This isn't Sony's great victory. This is a small step in the right direction. There's still tons of concerns listed here, beginning with Stellar Blade and other recent things, but historical ones, especially involving the Crunchyroll and Funimation mergers and other games that have been censored in recent years. This is just the beginning, and this should be encouraging to people. And yeah, you should view this as an opportunity to make your voices heard to Sony and make them start listening. It's in Sony's best interest to listen to people who are voting and making their opinions shared with their wallets and their negative reviews. But for now, that is going to do it for this video. This is obviously a great situation for PC players and Helldivers 2 players alike. And as always, feel free to share your thoughts about today's topics in the comment section down below. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.